Hi everyone. A pre-talk warning. I've broken one of my ribs. No joke, I know. I coughed really, really hard about a week and a half ago and I've done something to one of my ribs, so it really, really hurts. So if I sneeze, I'm probably going to pass out. So just a warning. I normally use red font here, but this talk has a lot of pink in it, which I would show you if I could click properly. Cool. So I was trying to match. I even wore pink today, which is this. It's the only, the only pink thing I owned, okay? Happy Christmas, everybody. It's the best time of year to be single. I'm going to talk about dating. Content warning. This might get a bit confessional. Anyone in the room who's just took breath? I'm not going to mention any names. I went to university to meet my Prince Charming. Actually, I went to university to get away from my mother. But while I was there, I thought it would be a really good place to meet a man who was rich, intelligent, handsome, all the other things. And I actually lucked out in my university halls in my first year. I met a guy who was blonde, he was posh, he was literally top of his class, like he got a prize for it. And I was not the paragon of confidence that you see before you today, so I took my mother's advice, which is strange for me, as you can imagine, and I held on to this one. In this case, for 5 years. And so I thought I was done. I thought I was like, this is it, I'm done now, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'll just stick with this guy. But halfway through last year, I found out that I wasn't, and I panicked. I didn't have any idea how to date. I still don't. But ever since then, I've been looking at it kind of academically. I've taken a real interest in dating and the systems of dating. Dating is a game, not in a Neil Strauss kind of way, but in a cooperative multiplayer kind of way. Everyone's got goals, there are restrictions, there are stats, you might even have a skill level. We'll find out more about mine later. One of my favorite games deconstructs the dating game in a way that is both hilarious and also way more accurate than it seems at first glance. It is called Kitty Powers Matchmaker. I'm sometimes reluctant to tell people that this is one of my favorite games, and I think that might be because I'm worried about what they'll think about me. But that depends. In humor, in comedy, guys, we call this a callback. But that really depends on my mood. Sometimes I use it to do things like this instead. This actually happened in this bar. Someone came up to me at a gaming event and went, "Are you a gamer?" I was like, yeah, my favorite game is Kitty Powers Matchmaker. And he was like, "Oh, I've never heard of it." I was like, "Guess you're not a gamer then." I talk about this game a lot, as my friends will know, and still some of you haven't played it. So bear with me for the next 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to evangelize why I think this is one of the best dating games ever. Not just because, oh, he's not looking. Not just because it's hilarious, and it is, but because it actually, I told him there was going to be a joke about him in this talk, and I think he was pretty worried, so he's probably quite relieved at this point that that's all that it is. But Kitty Powers Matchmaker, though it looks like a shallow, casual, girly game, it's actually a very, very complex sim that kind of accurately reflects what real dating is like from my experience of watching other people do it. You know that thing when you're on a date and it's going really, really well and then you need to fart? So you try and hold it in, and to find out if you're successful, you play a game of higher or lower. Okay, so it's not a one-to-one sim, but as those of you who've read any of my work, like this article, for instance, which apparently is not as subtle way to work through a breakup as I thought it was. I thought no one would figure out that that's why I wrote it, but apparently not. You'll know that what I like about games is when they abstract real-life scenarios and turn them into game mechanics. So that's obviously something they do a lot in The Sims. So in Kitty Powers Matchmaker, you're an employee at a matchmaking agency. This is your boss, Kitty Powers. She is the drag persona of the developer, Richard Frank. And what you do, so this is my employee ID. I am a level 17 romance overlord. Because apparently that's my escapist power fantasy. What you do is you get a client. Oh, this guy's actually my type. Hello, Antonio Clapgasket. You choose a client, And then you find them a match based on their stats. So they've got a preference. This guy likes women, but he could like men, he could like both. In fact, same-sex marriage is legal in this game. There's even an achievement for setting up 50 same-gender relationships. Also, side note, all of the pronouns in the game are gender neutral, which I thought was a really nice touch. Also job, so all of the jobs have a star rating out of 3. That denotes how much money they make, which is impressive to the other person. Also how snobby they'll be about restaurants. Apparently, video game programmer is a 3-star job. They also have 3 interests. Some of them are pretty funny. These aren't actually the funniest ones, you'll have to play it to find some of your own. But everyone has 3 and only 3. Which I think would be useful in real life. And everyone has a physical type. Those who know me will know that I have this tendency when I enter a room to scan it for blonde men, which is kind of how I approach clothes shopping. So I don't see the difference. I just go straight for the red dress. In Kitty Power's Matchmaker, it is hair and eye color. If they get a good match, then it kind of boosts their appreciation of the other person when they first lay eyes on each other. Though, as I've discovered in real life, someone may be perfectly your physical type and not right for you at all. They also have a personality, and it comes in 5 categories. So you've got relaxed/active, methodical/carefree, and experimental/traditional, introvert/extrovert, and romantic/spicy. Because apparently you can't be both. Sorry. Oh, this is slowing down. They have bad habits, which some people might mind and some people might not. And they have guilty pleasures, which are interests they have that go counter to the rest of their character. Because, as Kitty says, actually Richard Frank said in a GDC talk, everyone has peculiar foibles that they don't tell their friends about. It all falls under what the game calls a type. So their interests and their personality will kind of fit with what you might think of as kind of stereotypes of our society. They're supposed to be nice, affectionate stereotypes, not mean ones. So you've got like, he's a sporty type, so maybe not my type actually. You've also got like hipsters, so people who like postmodern irony, boutique business startups, artisan coffee and facial hair. You get achievements, actually, for matching different types. So there's one called Coffee Run, which you get for matching a hipster with a sporty type. But apparently it's better to match the same type. It's just more likely to work if you date sporty with sporty and hipster with hipster, etc. All the nerd couples in the room will probably agree with me. I didn't want to point to anyone in particular there. It's just a general sweep. So what you do then is you look at your black book of candidates, which is a word I quite like for someone you're thinking of dating and I might start using. You've got procedurally generated characters, though these ones with their little globe next to them, those are anonymized other people's avatars that come into your game. You find a good match for the person, or when you think would be a good match, and then you send them on a date. You pick a restaurant, and then all the restaurants get put in envelopes and mixed up, and you've got to keep your eye on the right one, which I think is kind of a good parallel with just the panic of choice paralysis and the risk you're taking when you're taking someone on a date and you don't know what kind of food they like. I think that's a pretty good analysis of that. They also have really funny names. That's a difficulty level, not an instruction. You've got to remember as well to choose according to the candidate's pay grade. So the person you're taking on the date, you've got to choose a restaurant that they'll appreciate, otherwise this will happen. And you'll get a red cross in the corner, and if you get 3 red crosses for pissing them off in this and other ways, then they will actually make an excuse and walk out on the date, and your client will not be very happy with you. So if you think you've got the candidate's type correct, so the person you're sending them on the date with, then you can spend your time before you send them to the restaurant changing their appearance to make them more attractive to the type of person that you're taking them on a date with. You change their haircut, their facial decor, and Kitty will tell you, oh, a hipster type would really like that moustache, etc. I think this is really funny because a sporty type apparently wants to go to a super fancy restaurant with someone dressed in a tracksuit. Also be punctual, that's very important. It impresses them if you turn up on time, not having spent too much time getting ready, and picking the right food, which might be difficult in some restaurants. Apparently that means fish balls. Interestingly, your client, will always pick the same food as the candidate, which I guess is just like a streamlining of the game systems, but I think it makes me think of when someone pretends to be vegetarian because they're trying to impress the person they're going on a date with, which actually happens. I have a friend who's been married many, many years to someone who he told was vegetarian because he thought it would impress her, and has now been vegetarian for like 20 years because of that. Most of the date revolves around conversation, and this is represented in something that I wish I had in real life, a love handle, not that kind. I have those, you just can't see them in this dress. The love handle in this case is when you pull to spin the fruit machine of conversational topics. Never again need you to be stuck frantically thinking of something to say, something to talk about. But keep in mind that after the candidate has offered their opinion on the topic, your client also speaks, and you can't control necessarily what they think about something, so they might not agree. So you've got to pick topics that you think they'll agree on, and ignore the things that they won't agree on. Apparently this is important for dating. As in real life, don't talk about the same thing twice. This is something we've all done, I'm sure. Fortunately, there are lots of topics to cover. You can talk about their appearance. Get bonus points, by the way, for changing their appearance in between every date, because then you can talk about it again. So if they really like your sporty haircut, get a new sporty haircut for the next date, and they will also really like that one. You can talk about their interests. Everyone has 3, and exactly 3, so you can talk about that 3 times. Or you can talk about their job. Their type will dictate how they feel about the other person's job. Apparently, having the same job is a really, really good thing, to which I say no thank you. When they talk about personality, they do it in a kind of roundabout way. They ask each other these quiz-type questions to find out what personality the other person has got. And apparently, again, the same applies. You want to have the same personality type as the other person. Extroverts should date extroverts, which may be where I've been going wrong. Guilty pleasures is something you should only bring up in the 2nd or 3rd date because it's very personal. I'm losing my notes. The real world lesson here, I think, is that if you think the other person doesn't have interests that go well with yours, take them on a 2nd date. They might have a guilty pleasure that is right up your alley. At lots of points during the date, you have the opportunity to lie in order to make the person think you're a better match than you are. This is one of my favorite systems in the entire game, I think, because I feel like it's actually quite accurate. For one thing, you can't guarantee that the lie will work. Every time you want to lie, you have to spin the wheel of misfortune to find out if you get away with it. Also, even if your lie does work, later on down the line when you get a letter from your happy couple, they may have broken up because one of them lied a lot to the other one, which I think is a lesson for all of us. My clients never lie. The other subtleties of dating beyond conversation are represented in various mini-games, so like this one. Some of them, like the farting game, are influenced by the personality type of the person you're on a date with. So if you fail the farting mini-game and you let one rip, you have to choose whether to own up to it or not. As I said, my clients never lie, so I always own up to it. But the response of the other person depends on their personality. Some won't mind. They'll be like, better out than in, whereas some will. The same thing happens if you get a surprise appearance from your ex. Again, you choose whether to own up to who that person was. And if you tell the truth, some people will be really, really annoyed. They'll be like, how would they like it if I interrupted their date? But some people are pretty cool with it. They love that you're still on good terms with your ex, which I think is good. When it comes to deciding how to split the bill, sometimes you get to play a pachinko game. You would think this is not anything to do with what dating is actually like, but I think this reflects the British humour of the game. Very much the, oh no, I'll pay. Oh, are you sure? No, I can't. Oh, go on then, kind of thing that we have going on in this country. The back and forth, the kind of randomness of it. And it's also affected by personality. So traditional people will want you to treat them, whereas experimental people, they'll want to pay. Splitting the bill is always safe. No one gets annoyed, but no one is particularly happy about it either. A side note, it's nothing to do with gender. It's not that women who are traditional want you to pay. It's just that the person you're taking on the date, if they're traditional, they want you to pay. If they're experimental, they want to pay. Some of the mini games have nothing to do with personality. Flirting in Kitty Powers Matchmaker happens when the other person gets something in their eye and accidentally winks at you. And you think that they're flirting with you, so you have a quick panic and you play a game of rock, paper, scissors with them. And you try and beat them, and then you're a successful flirt. It's an accidental competition, and I think that's a really, really good allegory for what flirting is like in real life sometimes. The chef sometimes comes over at the end of the date and asks how the food was. And you get an opportunity to play a memory game. You memorize all of these foodie words, and then you reel off this utter crap, this foodie crap, like it had an indescribably delicious underbelly. And again, personality is not a factor, because apparently everybody loves a bit of culinary verbosity. One of my favorites is this one. It's when you're asked to tell a story about your life. Has this ever happened to you in real life? Someone goes, tell me something about yourself. And you're like, shit, I can't think of anything. So you just kind of grab at straws, trying to think of something interesting to say. And then you play a pair matching game, which really, really reminds me of that moment when you're telling a story and it's going well and then you completely lose your train of thought and you're frantically trying to remember what the next thing was that you were going to say. It's kind of like giving a talk at VideoBrains. In fact, lots of these mini games are to do with memory. You need to remember who your waiter was. The candidate will never remember who the waiter was, but they are disgusted with you if you can't remember who the waiter was. You've got to remember what your date's silhouette looks like in case there's a power cut and you need to spot them in the dark. There's also a mini game where sometimes your date will disappear off to the bathroom and then they'll come back and something about their appearance will have changed and they're kind of testing you and you have to guess what the thing about their appearance was that changed, which leads to some really funny kind of systems-driven humor. Like I sent 2 guys on a date and my client was wearing a hat, and halfway through the date, his date disappeared into the bathroom and came back with a hat of his own. Definitely remember the name of the person that you're going on the date with as well. Otherwise it won't go well. Basically, I think the lesson that Kitty Powers Matchmaker is teaching us is that dating, a lot of dating, is to do with paying attention. As G. Christopher Williams said when he wrote about it for Pop Matters, being paid attention to is what we often see as evidence of someone else's love for us and what we crave. And I think that's probably actually why Kitty Powers is one of my favorite games, because attention is one of my favorite things. It's also just more realistic though. Compare it to the kindness coins approach taken to dating in other games. Okay, so there's no sexy CGI scenes. All you get is your couple in a hot tub if the date goes well. But it more accurately reflects the journey, which I think is almost the more interesting part of dating, yet still safely removed from the more realistic dating games. In fact, I have a friend who is so fed up of being single and playing on these dating apps and sites that she found herself straying back to Kitty Powers Matchmaker all the time. I asked her if it was okay to tell this story, but I kept her name out of it. But she said this: every time I played, I felt like I was procrastinating from actual dating work. But it was just way more fun and interesting. And I know how she feels. The way I see it, though, playing all these dozens and dozens of hours of Kitty Powers Matchmaker, I'm honing my skills. I'm biding my time. Oh, so if anyone out there wants to date me, I'm going to look at the camera now because I'm not going to assume anyone in this room does. If anyone out there wants to date me, take the money that you would have spent on a couple of artisan coffees and buy Kitty Powers Matchmaker instead. Actually, it'd be an artisan hot chocolate for me, just to know. Also, if you're in London, probably that's cheaper than 2 coffees, right? And anyway, so go play Kitty Powers Matchmaker for a dozen or so hours and then get back to me. Because I am a level 17 romance overlord and I don't date down.